coming. I think you're in store for a really thorough and interesting set of presentations today. I'd like to thank Golden Pear for providing our refreshments. There is a sign-in sheet with emails, and the reason we're doing that is if you're interested in receiving the PowerPoints that are going to be shown today, we can email them to you, so please sign in if you haven't. And basically, we'll get started. The situation has been identified for many years in this village, and over the course of the last 4 years especially, there's been a serious effort to try to deal with the clean water issues that the village has, and specifically the sewer, development of a sewer. We have had a committee that meets regularly and frankly has put together a very compelling map and plan and strategy. The options were all discussed thoroughly, and the consensus of the group was what you will see today. The committee is made up of the chair, Paul Travis, who I have to give a particularly warm shout out to. He has been an inspiring leader and keeping us on track. Our engineer is here, Adriana from D&B Engineering. Ed Moneypenny is a member of the committee. Nancy Kane is a member of the committee. And I'm forgetting. And Rob Varadian, of course, is a member of the committee. And they're here. Trustee Simeone, welcome. And Trustee Stevenson, welcome. So with that, I would like to ask Chris Gobler to begin our presentations. Thank you.
See the share button.
That's how we do it.
But the share button's not in there yet.
Oh, you have to just join this.
I'm in this.
Zoom?
Yeah.
Let me bring you in.
Okay. I'm halfway in the Zoom, I guess. But in the meanwhile, I can say good morning, everyone. And, good to see everybody on a Saturday morning. Lots of enthusiasm for clean water, so that's great. And so I'm Chris Gobler. I'm a professor at Stony Brook University, where I've been on the faculty for 20 years, but I've been in Southampton as a professor for 25 years and been studying Lake Agawam for, well, more than 20 years. And so I'm going to just give a brief presentation here that's going to be focused, obviously, on Lake Agawam, but also, and kind of a broad overview. So I'm going to be talking about water quality in general, water quality in Lake Agawam. Mention a lot of things that are underway to help clean up Lake Agawam. I'm going to talk about some projects related to Proposition 3 that's going to be on the ballot in November. That's very important that everybody should know about. And then also setting up, about the sewer district as well. So let's begin. Okay, well, I think, an important overarching concept that hopefully we're all aware of is that of the watershed. And that is, any water body across Long Island is affected by what's going on land. And what's happening in the watershed is doubly important because the water that falls on the land around us falls into the ground below us. And that's where it becomes our drinking water source. And what we don't extract for drinking water then discharges into surface waters. So everything happening on the land is very, very important and we need to be highly cognizant of because it directly influences our health with regards to our drinking water and the health of our coastal ecosystems. And, if you're following the science literature these days, tap water might be our best source of drinking water when you think about things like microplastics. So we want that tap water and our groundwater to be as clean as possible. Things have changed a lot here in the village of Southampton, in Suffolk County, in the town of Southampton. This is just sort of indicative of that, and that's the population growth of Suffolk County during from the 20th century through to today. And as it turns out, at this point, Suffolk County is the third most populous county in all of New York State. Right? It's Brooklyn, Queens, Suffolk County. And Suffolk County, actually, since 2020, is the only downstate county to have grown in population. All the 5 boroughs shrunk, Nassau County shrunk. You may know New York State is a shrinking state, right? We lost representatives to places like Florida and Texas. But Suffolk County continues to grow. And so with that comes changes to the quality of our groundwater. And that's what's shown here in the rising levels of nitrogen in our groundwater. And that rising level of nitrogen can have a big effect on coastal ecosystems. They can stimulate algal blooms, and the algal blooms, as they decay, can starve our coastal waters of oxygen. And I'm going to focus a lot on Lake Agawam, but what I'm showing you here is a map that I just finished preparing in collaboration with some help from the Nature Conservancy. But this is monitoring my laboratory has been doing during essentially the summer of 2024. So this is data hot off the presses, June through September. And what it shows is, while you could pick out Lake Agawam there, but it shows the widespread nature of things we call harmful algal blooms and things we would call hypoxic zones, also known as dead zones, areas with low levels of oxygen. These all come from the overloading of nutrients, specifically nitrogen, into coastal waters. And so you can see, while Lake Agawam is called out for low oxygen at times, blue-green algal blooms, it's not alone. And in fact, here in the South Fork, there's many areas that are experiencing both the low oxygen conditions and these blue-green algae blooms. But now to put the focus squarely on Lake Agawam, like I said, I've been studying this lake for more than 20 years, and it has a long history there in that time of these blue-green algae blooms, which I'll explain, and also even fish kills that have occurred because the oxygen levels have gone literally to zero at times. And, you know, it's been notorious. Here's a headline from 2018. The thing you don't want to see in the news, or you don't want to make news for. Record levels, but the wrong kind of record. In this case, toxic blue-green algae. And this is why. This is from 2018, and just showing across New York State the top 10 lakes for the number of weeks they've been listed by the DEC for having blue-green algae blooms. And then below you see the pictures. They're not fun to look at, really. And again, this is from 2018. There's been a little progress since then, and I'll talk about that. But just to hone in on what these blue-green algae are, here's a couple of the microscopic images of the 2 most common types. And they're worrisome because they make toxins. The microcystis on the left makes microcystin, a gastrointestinal toxin. Anabena, which is less common in Lake Agawam but has been there, makes a neurotoxin called anatoxin A. When these toxins were first identified by scientists, the pejorative terms they used were fast death factor and very fast death factor. And that's because when they isolated the compounds and they administered them to mice, which is how it was done back in the day, the mice died fast and very fast, respectively. So these are serious compounds. They have human health implications with regards to promoting cancers. Now, thankfully, we're not drinking the water from Lake Agawam, but obviously that's a troubling outcome right there. And outside of humans, these toxins can be dangerous to animals. So just as an example, not many years ago in Africa, they had events where these blooms led to the death of endangered elephants. And these are obviously very large mammals. And, mammals more dear to our hearts, pets, specifically dogs, can be very vulnerable, actually, to these blue-green algae blooms. This is just headlines I pulled from the news, just like one. I remember I pulled this slide out. It was from 2019, but this was from just from 1 week in 2019. And so if you look at the national news, you do a Google News search in the summer, these are the sort of headlines you can see. And it's not surprising. The CDC released this paper a few years ago essentially showing historically there have been hundreds of cases of dog poisonings in the U.S. from cyanobacteria. This is data from 2024, and I just I'm going to show two slides just to clarify a point. When I last spoke in this room, I was quoted as saying that Lake Agawam hit a high mark for blue-green algae and it was a clear and present danger. I spoke on July 23rd, and you can see what I was talking about. There was a very intense bloom that exact week. So I was being crystal clear by saying clear and present danger when I was speaking on that week, because that you could see what the levels were. Those were the highest levels we've seen in years. Someone questioned, I'm just going to be honest, my integrity when I said later in the summer that Lake Agawam was improving. Here's the data to show that it was improving what I was speaking to. So again, when I say clear and present danger, this is what I was referring to. This lines up exactly with that data point the week I was speaking. And when I said Lake Agawam's improved, here's the data that I was referring to. And the fact of the matter is, when I spoke in August, on average for 2024, up until that point, Lake Agawam actually, that is the best year, 2024, Lake Agawam had seen in a decade, right? Still a lot of work to be done, however. Now, first, note 2018, that record-setting bloom in the headlines of Newsday. You see where that landed. There has been progress since then, but there's still a lot to do, right? To get below the level the DEC wants to see Lake Agawam at is below 25 micrograms per liter, right? We're still fourfold over, so there's still a lot of work to be done. So let's talk about some of the work to be done. But before that, just to point out one thing, what's controlling these algal blooms. In the literature, you could see it might be nitrogen, it might be phosphorus. We've done these experiments over the years, and this is just to show a very simple experiment where we took the water from Lake Agawam, we added nitrogen, that's the N, phosphorus, that's the P, and then nitrogen and phosphorus together. And so what you see is a very strong increase in both the total phytoplankton community and microcystis, which is that toxic blue-green algae, from nitrogen. And, phosphorus, no, and if you add phosphorus to the nitrogen, it's about the same outcome. So it's really the nitrogen that is a big driver here. And we've done studies with regards to where the nitrogen's coming from, and this is how it all breaks down. And the big answer is wastewater. Wastewater from Main Street, wastewater from around the watershed, wastewater from the homes around the lake. There's certainly a component of fertilizer, but wastewater is the very strong source here.
Chris, can you just mention how far north or how large is the watershed for Agawam?
Goes as far north or even further north than Sunrise Highway. So that's how. And I'm going to show some pictures later. And and there's an image of it over here. But I have a slide showing it later. It's a good question, and I'm going to talk more about that later. And phosphorus is also important, and we see that coming a lot from the sediments. For those of you who are not aware, we were very fortunate to have Lake Agawam called out as one of 5 lakes in all of New York State that the DEC honed in on and created, you see here, a harmful algal bloom action plan, completed in 2020. And this was adopted by the village, the state, by the town, something that everybody can get behind. And because of this, there's been a lot of positive action already. And like I said, we're on the right trajectory with more work to be done. Just going to roll through some things we've done. Firstly, we have an autonomous buoy. This has been supported by the Lake Agawam Conservancy. But this buoy gives us real-time measurements of what's happening in the lake. So, which is really important. My lab group is out there at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. But this buoy can tell us maybe we need to get out there even sooner than that. Or maybe something happened overnight. And things can happen that quickly. So that's been a real value. We're going to hear all about the plan for sewering the downtown. So important. And there's a pending CPF grant to support that. And as I showed in that model, it represents almost a quarter of the nitrogen going into the lake. So that's very important. In 2020, I think about 2021, I worked with the village to get a grant from the state, specifically to work on upgrading septic systems and something known as a permeable reactive barrier. And I'm going to talk about that now. So on the septic system front, with that grant, we worked with homeowners to come up with plans to upgrade a traditional system to a system that leads to lower levels of nitrogen coming out of the septic tanks. And what we've been doing, in all cases, the ones we designed were something called a Fuji Clean system, but linked to something that we've created at the Stony Brook University. There I direct something called the New York State Center for Clean Water Technology, and it's called a wood chip box. And when you link these two technologies together, you can actually achieve these exceedingly low levels of nitrogen. And just for perspective, this graph here on the far right shows you, it's not even labeled, it should be, sorry. If you don't do anything, that's what the effluent is. Then it's showing different commercial systems. The one in the very far left is when you take the Fuji Clean system and then you link it to that wood chip box. So we're excited about that being a technology that can be installed right on the lake, and we've got several homes ready to go to get these upgrades done. There's also been a lot of work on stormwater management. When I first started working on Lake Agawam, and there was a rainfall event, the whole village was specifically plumbed to drain into Lake Agawam. So all the water would just fly down all the streets, and the drain at the far north, and to the northwest, to the northeast, to the south, it all came in. That's changing, thankfully. There's been a lot of effort made by the village, by the Lake Agawam Conservancy, in putting in things to slow the flow of water into the lake, divert it, and to absorb the nutrients before they go in. That runoff also contains a lot of bacteria, right? So by putting in things like bioswales, buffers, and wetlands, you can slow that flow, you can remove nutrients, and also potentially remove pathogens. And just one more, about native plantings along roadsides. There's just more details, but in essence, it's what I just said. These things are going to serve the purpose of slowing the flow of water so it's not flying into the lake, removing nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus, and removing pathogens. And and the more vegetation you have in these buffers, the better. So there's the watershed. Each watershed draft is going to be a little bit different depending on the group that puts it together. But yeah, there it is. You can see it goes as far north and further north than Route 27. And when you think about the other nearby lakes, this is a bigger watershed, significantly so, than Old Town Pond and Wickapog Pond as well. And recognize the numbers at the top there. There are about 100 people living on the lake. There's 7,000 people in that watershed. Right, so and everybody is contributing. So it's all what's happening on the lake is important, but what's happening throughout the watershed is also important. This is a slide from the Suffolk County's 2020 sub-watershed plan, and there's several important aspects I want to highlight here. First, if you look in the upper left, that's their estimate of nitrogen loading into Lake Agawam, and essentially affirming what I showed before, but even stronger. In this case, it's wastewater's 85% of the nitrogen coming in there. So really addressing the sewage treatment plant and the on-site system is so important. The other thing I want to highlight here is if you see that now, in this case, the watershed, you see it has 3 different colors, shaped a little bit different, and it's smaller than the other one in part because it's only showing each of those colors is a different travel time for groundwater. So in the red, it's what they call the 0 to 2 travel time horizon. In the orange, it's 2 to 10. And in the yellow, it's 10 to 25. And if you took the next layer, where I showed before, that would be 25 to 50. But when you hear these years, I'm emphasizing that in this slide because what it is to say is that even if today we upgraded every septic system in that whole watershed, what this is saying is that it's going to take 25 years for the dirty water to flush out. And what that means is that we need to have activities in the meanwhile to work in parallel to get the lake and keep the lake clean. And that's what I'm going to highlight now, because these 2 projects, the final things I'm going to talk about, are ones that have to do with Proposition 3. And with the passage of Proposition 3, both of these projects will be implemented. And they're both meant, just go back to emphasize this, to to address this, what we would call legacy nitrogen, right? The things that they're not addressing the root source, but it's getting the nitrogen out of the system now while we can.
Chris, before you get to that, one thing you told me that at first sounded counterintuitive, but was remarkable, was that when you look at those three layers and the fourth one that we can't see right now,
Yeah.
that the only difference between a house, where my house is, for example,
Yeah.
and a house beyond the yellow layer, is the time it takes for the nitrogen to get to the lake. It's not the quantity.
That's
So
right. That's right.
why we have such
That's right.
a 25-year legacy flume.
Yes.
that we have to deal with.
Yeah. And in some cases, the home that's further north might be more impactful, only in that it may be a year-round resident that's contributing 12 months worth of wastewater, as opposed to somebody closer that maybe might only be seasonal. But that's right. Once nitrogen in the groundwater is converted to nitrate, which happens right, after about 5 to 10 feet, that nitrate is very, very stable, and there's almost nothing that's going to take it out unless it runs into a wetland or something like that. So, with regards to I'm going to talk now about this, what's known as the AECOM algae harvester. That would be on the Dozier property, which is part of Proposition 3. And there's the location. But I want to get into some of the details. And that's because, for those of you who don't know, this was already used in Lake Agawam. So that's why it's exciting to actually bring it back. It was put on Lake Agawam for about a 2-week period in 2019 as a test case. Would this work? Right? And the results, frankly, totally shocked me. In that, this system removed more than 90% of the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the blue-green algae, and the blue-green algal toxins for the water that was passing through it. So essentially the way it works is, let's see, do I have an image?
I don't remember that.
What was the question?
Same place.
Where,
It was in the same place in the parking lot back by the next to the playground.
Yeah.
Set up for about 3 weeks.
I think it was there for 3 weeks, was operational for 2 weeks. So this is just an image to get a sense of, I can't remember if this is accurate. I think this is how they had it working. So there's a very large boom, the water coming in, and the idea is the water comes in and it essentially passes through a conveyor belt, and the clean water goes through the conveyor belt. But because of the attributes of the blue-green algae, they're particles, firstly. And they tend to float at the surface. And so what you see is, as it goes through that conveyor belt that has sort of, think of it as like a sieve, the water goes through, the algae are trapped in the surface, the water that goes through, again, has had 90% of the nitrogen, phosphorus, and blue-green algae removed. And now you can see why that would be, right? That's the blue-green algae. That's what's getting removed, right? And so that's going to get taken off. In some cases, they think they can even make bioplastics out of it. That might be aspirational, but the important thing is that it's getting taken out of the lake. And I want to go back now to this slide here. And so in some ways, this whole approach, like we're going to filter the lake, may seem foreign, right? But I want to emphasize this is actually an approach that the DEC wants to see implemented and is implementing all across New York State. The approach is called bioextraction, and it's very simply it's kind of working with nature. It sounds a little squishy maybe, but it's the idea of let the plants and animals do the work, because what do naturally? They take nitrogen and phosphorus out of the water, and then let's just pull them out of the water, and we're bioextracting the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and in some cases even the carbon. And so just to look at the images here on the far left, that's sugar kelp, right? So that's my colleague Mike Dole, who helped bring sugar kelp to New York. He actually had a full-page article in the New York Times on a big picture. They called him the Johnny Appleseed of kelp, because he keeps spreading kelp all around New York. And but what you see he's holding there is a line with, you can't see the bottom. It's a 12-foot kelp blade, right? And so we've been growing the kelp. You put it out now. It looks just like a rope. You can't even see the kelp. But after 5 months, it's got these luxurious 12-foot long kelp blades, and these lines are 100-foot long, and we put them out over an entire acre and you're pulling out firstly tens of thousands of pounds of biomass, but hundreds of pounds of nitrogen. So you let the seaweeds do the work, and you pull it out, right? And then in this case, we're turning the kelp into fertilizer. On the upper right are bivalves, filter feeding bivalves, right? What are they? You heard me already say the word filter feeding. That's how they eat. It's just natural. Clams, oysters, mussels, scallops. So when you are harvesting those shellfish, hopefully in a sustainable way from the ecosystem, they're doing the work of taking the nitrogen and phosphorus out as they filter feed, and then you're taking the nitrogen and phosphorus out of the ecosystem when you pull them out. And then the lower right is something known as a algae harvester that's of a different variety. It's actually called an aquatic weed harvester that has been put out in Lake Agawam for almost a decade. And every year they put it out. And what it does is that in Lake Agawam they have issues. No, I'm sorry. Got that wrong. Not Lake Agawam. Georgia Pond. Sorry. Too many water bodies. But they've been putting it out for a decade in Georgia Pond because they had a problem with macroalgae growing and also pondweed growing. And essentially, it's like mowing the lawn. It goes through, it cuts the pondweed, and it harvests it. And they do it all summer long. And it actually, as they do it, the plants are still there, but through the process of them growing, being cut, growing, being cut, it removes up to 20% of the nitrogen and phosphorus. Now, on the one hand, it doesn't sound like a lot, but the remarkable thing is that Georgia Pond had blue-green algae blooms worse than Lake Agawam when I first started studying it in 2013, 14, 15. That weed harvester went in 2016, and they totally changed course. So there's beyond the nitrogen and phosphorus, it looks like the blue-green algae were actually growing on some of the pondweeds. There was also removing them as well. But suffice to say, this idea. Well, let me just finish. Yet another thing, water lilies. We've done water lily removal in Lake Agawam in some cases, and that's been doubly important. On the one hand, if you look at on the right-hand image, it looks like you're looking at a lawn, but the lawn just in the upper left, that's blue-green algae. That's in a blue-green algae scum. It's almost a solid, and it's because the water lilies were literally holding in the blue-green algae and slowing down the flow of the water. So by removing the water lilies, one, we were increasing the flow in Lake Agawam, but it was also a bioextraction project. You're removing the nitrogen and phosphorus as you remove the plant material. And so that's really all this is. It's bioextract. You're letting the blue-green algae do the work. As they grow, they're taking up the nitrogen and phosphorus, right? And even the legacy nitrogen and phosphorus, so the stuff that comes out of the sediment that's been there for years. And now we can actually get it out of the lake. With SAVE not doing this, what happens is the blue-green algae grow, they die, and it all stays in the lake. So now here's a chance to get it out of the lake.
So this kelp, you take this kelp out, and then what do you do? Plant more kelp?
Yes, yeah. Although it's seasonal, so the kelp on the kelp front for the bioextraction, we use kelp during the cooler months. It's a cold water seaweed. It grows from essentially the fall into the spring, and then in the spring we have other seaweeds that we put out, different red and green algae. That same idea. And so this is, so now we know that the blue-green algae grow in the summer. Let's make them do the work and let's remove them. And, I've done some calculations. And, you might think with this algae harvester, we're just going to get the lake clean by filtering it out. I actually think the bigger effect, I don't think that this is going to instantly take out enough algae to suddenly make the lake clean in a heartbeat. But my calculations suggest the sustained use of this, by continuing to harvest the nitrogen and the phosphorus, is actually going to starve out the blue-green algae. And that's what's going to make the blooms end. So it's not just that you're pulling them out and they're gone. It's just that you keep doing it, and then that nitrogen and phosphorus over time is going to be pulled out of the lake. So it's a pretty exciting aspect. And the good thing is that it's going to be owned by the village. And so after it's used there or in the town, I can't remember if it's a village or the town, but it could be used elsewhere once it's done enough work in Lake Agawam. Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming the kelp and the clams or whatever they're using are fresh water.
No, I just gave that as an example. Yeah, and Georgica Pond that's sort of a almost freshwater system. It's a brackish water system. The kelp is marine, and there are freshwater bivalves, but the examples that I'm giving are marine. Yeah.
And the other thing is, on the algae duster, does it spew anything up into the air? I'm a little concerned about the children's playground.
I don't, not to my knowledge. I think it's going to be contained. I think you saw, and it's all supposed to be contained, by and large, in there. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. And as far as what I've heard is that the mechanical sound is supposed to be the equivalent of like an air conditioner.
Chris, I went by the one when it was installed before. You could hear a hum of the pump, the water pump.
Mm.
The sound you really heard sounded to me like an air circulation system that I assume was filtered.
Yeah.
That was the larger sound actually, and the whole thing, as you said, was like an air conditioner.
Yeah.
Not that,
Well, that would have, it's also there. The little ones are right by the wall.
Yeah. I mean, in my sense, it would be no different than, as far as, what gets admitted than the cars in the parking lot, really. So just a final point then, one other thing that, and here's an image from AECOM from a project they had in Florida. This is like one of the most remarkable pictures you ever seen. I don't know all the details of it, but you can see it looks pretty remarkable. And maybe it was set up well because everything was on the surface there and very easy to remove. But I want to emphasize, I don't think that this is like a little canal. We're not going to see this effect in Lake Agawam. But like I said, my calculations show that we can starve out the blue-green algae if we use it over, I think, by the end of the first year even. So I'm not expecting this effect, but I am expecting that bioextraction to be highly effective.
Can the booms be relocated around the lake to
Yep.
Try to encourage flow through all parts of the lake?
I think they can be extended, yeah.
If I might, Chris, talking with AECOM, the company that does this, they actually are going to have a discharge pipe. It's all underwater or underground. Pumps are submerged.
Yeah.
At the north end of the lake. There's a pipe to the south end of the lake for the discharge.
Okay.
So they're taking water out of the north. The entire lake is the boom. So the circulation is south to north. But the good news is you put in the clean water at the south end when we open the pipe, drain at the beach. So the earliest beneficiary will be the beach.
Yeah.
That will get cleaner water when we have to drain the lake because of oil.
Yeah, and that's also an effective and efficient approach because during the summer, the predominant wind pattern is off of the ocean to the north, right? We all know this. As it warms up during the day, and so because these blue-green algae float to the surface, what that tends to do is concentrate the blue-green algae to the north. So it'll be, things will be pushed to the north and then filtered out, and the cleaner water returned to the south end. The last thing I want to talk about is the idea of a permanently reactive barrier. And specifically, something we're working on also for the Dozier property called an injection well reactive barrier, or PRB. You can see in the upper image, it's the idea that as contaminated groundwater flows towards a water body, you can put in something to intercept that groundwater that will react with the nitrogen in that groundwater and pull it out, or get the nitrogen out of the groundwater. So in many cases, or in the most traditional case, it's simply a barrier of wood chips that go in. And when the nitrate hits the wood chips, it denitrifies and the nitrogen is turned to nitrogen gas. We're working on a slightly different approach that essentially the same concept, but a slightly different approach. And specifically, it's called an injection well. And it's because the nitrate that's coming into Lake Agawam seems to be a little bit deeper than we'd want to put trenching in. So we've been working on this for a while. That Smart Cities grant that I got way back in 2020 or 2021. The original idea was we'll put this across the parkland there to the north. We did some, and then eventually we ended up looking more carefully all to the east there, and I'll show you why momentarily. When we looked to the far north, we did find some nitrogen, but found two issues with it. One, a lot of it was ammonium and not nitrate, and the reactive barriers work great for nitrate, not ammonium. And two, a lot of it was deeper down. But when we went to that third site, you can see the profile here. Nitrate is the second number, so it's depth and then nitrate. And what we found there is actually it was dominated by nitrate, and it wasn't as deep as the other locations. And so, in speaking with different engineers who have worked with during reactive barriers, so you wouldn't want to put in a trench for a reactive barrier below 30 feet, right? So maybe that would work, but you'd miss most of the nitrogen. So that's why this injection well is going to be a better approach. So I wrote a CPF grant for this on behalf of the village in 2022. It's supported by the town. We've done a series of studies. You can see in the lower right conceptually where this would go. And just to be clear, this is addressing the plume of nitrogen coming off of Main Street. That's what we're dealing with here, right? We've got all these stores and homes and everything that's coming from Main Street and down, restaurants. That's the plume we're going to be hitting here by virtue of its location. And this just showing more of it. And essentially what this is a series of wells, and you can see there it's about a half a dozen. And then these wells are drilled down in such a way, and so the dark is the actual wells. The larger concentric circles that intersect are the sphere of influence of each well. And so what essentially is what the approach here is going to be is using something called emulsified vegetable oil, which may sound crazy at first. But the emulsified version of this is such that once it goes down, it's simply a carbon source and it doesn't migrate. The groundwater flows through, but this carbon source stays in place. So just like with the barrier, where the wood chips are there to provide, why are the wood chips there, right? They're a carbon source. The wood chips leach carbon, specifically cellulose, from the former tree. And that cellulose is the carbon that bacteria use to create an anoxic environment to therefore promote denitrification. In this case, that emulsified vegetable oil is the carbon source that stimulates the growth of the bacteria, that reduces the nitrogen, that then stimulates denitrification and converts the nitrate into nitrogen gas. And so, just to show it in a vertical here, again, the nitrate that we really want to treat is deeper than we can trench. So that's why this will work well. You can see where the injection point is, and the nitrate goes through in that area around the well. That sphere of influence is you can see they call it radius of influence. That's the area within which the emulsified vegetable oil moves, and this of course has been done many parts of the country already, and of course perfected such that it's not migrating beyond that little sphere of influence. But what you get is what's coming out on the other side has almost no nitrate in it because it's been denitrified off. And again, this is going to be part of that property.
Two quick questions. What's the source of the water? Is it the water being drawn out of the lake and put into those injection points? Or
I think there's maybe a mix of that water along with the emulsified vegetable oil.
Okay. And how long, what's the lifespan of the oil as a source of carbon? Is it,
I think that it's going to be on an I think the approach is going to be to put it in, should last at least a year, and then test and see if it needs to be refreshed thereafter. Yeah.
What's the schedule for the implementation of the injection well therapy?
If phase 3 passes, it can, I think, begin in the spring. Oh, sorry, Proposition 3 passes phase 3. Sorry. Yeah, and so that was all I was going to present. So I appreciate everyone's attention.
Thank you for the.
Yes, of course.
So, during my time period on the village board, we brought this up about sewage treatment a long time ago. We just couldn't seem to get the public interested in going forward. But when we first started having meetings about it, many engineers came. We didn't invite them, but they came. And their concern, and this is what I want to ask you, their concern, let me take this off. Their concern was that because Lake Agawam is spring fed, they were concerned that the pressure of the effluents which we don't want. I'm 100% in favor of doing this, but the effluence puts pressure on the springs, which makes the springs work in the lake. They said that they have seen many, many, many places where they have eliminated that around a pond, and the pond dries up because there's no pressure on the springs. Nobody has talked about that, and I don't know if you've looked into it, and it's a very important question.
I think that is not going to happen. And the reason is because of the size of the watershed. So again, if you just look at the size of the watershed for Lake Agawam, that's all contributing fresh water, right? And so what we're really just, the sewering is really, if we sewered that whole area, and then we said, yeah, we're going to pump that groundwater and we're going to send it out to the ocean, then that could happen. And in fact, that has happened in places like Nassau County, right? They've literally lost water bodies because of that. So that is a real, what you're saying is a real function. But my what I would say is because this is only 250 parcels and for a very limited area and just a fraction of the total watershed, it's actually going to have a negligible effect. It will not affect the water levels in Lake Agawam. If anything, it would be minor, and it would simply reduce the number of times per year that it has to go out to the ocean. But it certainly won't, because of the size of that watershed, there's still going to be plenty of water contributing to that water body.
Chris, thanks.
I have a question. I still don't understand, you might have said it 100 times, why do we have to switch properties? If the one property is already really large, why are we switching properties?
Well, I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is that property there is, again, where we need to put in the PRB. The groundwater is in there, and it's in close proximity to the lake. And that's where the algae harvester was used in the past successfully. It's been designed for the future. And again, to my understanding, I believe the property exchange is it's going to be 2-to-1. So then the village is getting twice the parkland in exchange, and that this property use is temporary. So it's only going to be, I think it's 5 years. Is that correct, Chuck?
I could probably speak to that a little bit, if you'd like.
You're used to the mic.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there is a very complicated process called alienation that the state requires, and it's very complex. When you have a piece of public land, which is Dozier Park, which is purchased with CPF money, you can't change the use of that unless you go through all these steps, which require going all the way through Albany, getting a sign-off by the legislature, getting a sign-off by the governor, and in the end, the entire town has to vote on whether or not they will allow a different use of what is parkland. This is that. Are you familiar with the Dozier parcel? You hardly even know it's there. It's behind the parking lot. It's not used for much. But so you have to replace. If you're going to alienate parkland, you have to replace it with something which is equal to or better than what you're alienating.
But if it doesn't go through, will they put it on the bigger part?
Well, I don't know what you would do. If this fails,
Yeah.
I think this is Chris can talk about that, about whether there was any other place this could go other than Dozier that would be effective.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of.
Why couldn't they run the lines under the road? If they put it across the street on a piece that the village / town has this also purchased. The only reason why I asked this is because that is the Dozier property was purchased for park use, and it's the only place we can expand the children's playground. There was a whole plan in place. There was one board member who didn't like it, and we didn't go forward with it, but it's the only place we can expand the children's playground. That's why I asked that question. I'm glad that you brought it up. I thought, could we put it across the street and run the lines under? I don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, the one thing I'm just going to say is I think I'm going to just pull on the line that I used in July. Lake Agawam is a clear and present danger to those children, right? I hate being a fearmonger, But I just want to tell you that I have colleagues I'm working with at Stony University that are showing that the toxins actually can be aerosolized, right? And so, as a clear and present danger, I think the most sound course of action is to take all actions possible. So, the permeable barrier is addressing this plume of sewage coming off of Main Street. And by addressing that, we're reducing the nitrogen that will make those events less toxic. That harvester that's going to be located there as well, is, like I said, is a surefire way to get 90% of the nitrogen, phosphorus, and blue-green algae out of the lake. And it's designed to be functional right there. And again, this is temporary. So essentially what I would say is that this is not meant to... both of those projects are not long-term projects. Right? There's no way that the algae harvester is not going to be permanent, and the reactive barrier is also meant to be there for a limited period of time.
But you know, and I know if and when the algae comes back, we'll need it. So, I mean, how do you ever do this?
Yeah, but excuse me, but we do need to get moving.
Okay.
We have a presentation. Chris, thank you for the master class. Very, very good. And Adriana Restrepo from D&B Engineering will now go through the sewer district.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to go faster through the first few slides. Dr. Gabler already did a phenomenal presentation on why it's a problem. So, but here, in addition to looking at that source of contamination through access to the shallow groundwaters, we're also talking about the existing on-site systems on each of the parcels, which most of them are from before the 1980s. Some of them are failing because of the groundwater is so close. It also causes the overflows and the reduced capacity of those systems. So here again, we're talking about why it's a public concern, and it's basically the combination of those two issues. One issue is to have the systems older and not, and with groundwater very close to the surface, which becomes a faster travel to the lake, as Dr. Gabler was explaining in his presentation. So this area is the area of influence where this nitrogen travels faster to the lake. And recently reports from the New York State DEC is showing like the blooms are happening basically weekly. So you could see in one of the posters, it has their report and the weeks that this has happened. So what's the solution? So in addition to all the measures that are being taken for addressing the problem that is happening right now in the accumulation of this nitrogen and the algae bloom, we're also looking at a long-term plan. And the long-term plan is to actually collect the sanitary sewers from and convey them, treat them so that it never reaches the groundwater or it never reaches the lake. So as we said before, this is of public concern because it reaches the groundwater and eventually reaches also the surface water. So what are the benefits of having this wastewater treatment plant? So it will be the benefit of collecting it will be preventing from getting to water bodies like Lake Agawam. It will have better compliance with environmental standards. As I said, the systems that are presently in these parcels are not up to code, and also enhance the public health of the area, and it helps on the revitalization of the downtown area. So what is the process to create the sewer system? So the first thing was to decide what the service area was about. So this is where it comes into play that this is within the watershed of the Lake Agawam. So these are the parcels that impact the lake, that had a greatest impact in the lake. And so collecting the water from these parcels is creating a benefit, a faster benefit to the area. The service area also was expanded to include the town hall and the elementary school, and it accommodates also for the development of this business district. So in continuing implementing the solution, the first thing was to look about the flow. So what's the flow of the parcels that it's coming into the sanitary flow from the parcels. So there's a couple of steps that are taken to do this. One is to look at each of the parcels and the use of each property. So Suffolk County Health Department has specific standards. So if it's a restaurant, it has a certain flow, and it's based on the number of seats that the restaurant has. If it's a retail space, it's a different number. It's based on the square footage. So all of that we look into how to the calculation of each of the parcels that are in this service area that I spoke about. The next step is to look at what is this will be for the existing flow, so the present use of each of those parcels. For the future flow, we look and see, is there development? What is the development proposed for the area? So we look specifically at certain zones where there was let's say vacant parcels, or a change because of how the master plan has been designed for the village. And the final is to select where, or to decide where all this pipe is going to come and how it's going to be collected and sent for treatment.
When was that study done on flow?
I'm sorry?
When was that study done on flow?
We started on 2021.
2021.
So we're looking at this different treatment methods. So we were looking at decentralized systems and considering those options, looking at centralized systems. So the centralized systems is what Dr. Gabler was talking about. So on-site systems. So in this case, the IAs, the innovative alternative on-site sanitary systems. It requires individual units. It needs routine maintenance, and it's a self-monitor system. So there are pros to use this system in areas that are not as densely populated as this area of downtown. Another system that was suggested at some point was STEP. It consists of treating the liquid effluent from the septic tanks. So it will require to install either a pump within the existing septic tank or separate from the tank. It requires power. So if there's a power outage, then you need to either stop using your anything that contributes to the sewer system, or just get a generator, other means. It needs yearly maintenance, and the solids still need to be pumped out of the septic tank, less often than in a normal septic tank, but they also need to be pumped out. So we're looking at a centralized system. So a centralized system is where this water is collected from the area and is sent to a treatment plant. So the plant is designed under the Suffolk County Health Department standards. It needs to be permitted. The effluent of the quality of the effluent is always monitored, and it's constantly monitored and reported to the county and to the DEC. So it's it prevents any issues in particular with the effluent from the plant. The technologies that were considered to do the process and the biological process end of the treatment included what's called sequential batch reactors and membrane biological reactors, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about those. So for the sequential batch reactors, or SBRs as they're called, was the selecting technology. It's a proven technology that is used widely in the county. There's currently a 1 MGD, a million gallons per day plant being built near the Forge River. And it's a county plant. And it's easy to maintain and operate. So selecting the treatment plant locations. So the idea is to have a parcel that it's located, in proximity to the service area, that it has deep groundwater, because you also want to slow down the the seepage and provide better conditions for the infiltration. You want a parcel that's large enough to accommodate the proposed treatment plant and the effluent disposal system. And
How large?
it's about 4 acres. It depends on, so there are limitations on the dimensions of the parcel because of the setbacks. So when you're locating your process building, the process building needs to be at least 150 feet from adjacent parcel lines or boundaries. So not all parcels that are like about 4 acres work as well, because if you have more boundaries around that, that parcel, then you have bigger limitations as opposed to if you have, let's say, a road or train tracks or whatever. That will extend the use of your parcel itself. And it's also, the setbacks are 150 with the property line and 200 to habitable structures. The effluent disposal system that the county prefers as a treatment is actually shallow leaching pools, and they need to be at least 25 feet from the property line. Currently, we're evaluating multiple sites and keep on looking at their viability. So a little bit more on the treatment system. So in addition to the biological part, which is that SBR I was talking about, there's also ahead of the treatment, there's a pre-treatment. The pre-treatment is pretty much a screen that will remove the bigger solids from the sanitary flow. Then the biological treatment will do its thing. So basically, the bacteria will consume the organics from the sewage, and then it will proceed from there. Will proceed to filtration and then disinfection. So filtration will remove the dissolved solids, and disinfection will kill bacteria. So a little bit more about this biological process within the plant. So the biological process, the SBRs, what it does, as I said, is like the bacteria will be consuming the organics, and the way it does it, it's the tank fills in first, then the bacteria starts reacting. For that, you give the bacteria enough air and time. Basically, that's all it is. It's nothing fancy. It's been done on pretty much every biological system consists of this. You keep the bugs happy to do what they need to do, and it takes some time to settle. So on the third picture on the bottom, you basically see that solids have settled in the tank. You take the effluent out, you decant the effluent, and then the process starts over. For this plant, we have 2 tanks, so flow is not interrupted. So flow comes into one tank, and while the other one is reacting, then the next tank is filling. So some concerns about the plant aesthetics or the plant odors, or I want to kind of talk a little bit about all of them. So the aesthetics. So what you're looking at is really a conceptual design of what it could look like, and in reality, once this goes through the design process and the site is selected, it will accommodate to the surroundings. So it will look like something else you have nearby, so that it blends in with the area, with whatever it is selected to be on. Another way that things are improved on the aesthetic part is they're usually surrounded by vegetation, so big trees around the building. So the plant is proposed to be enclosed in a building, so all the process equipment will be inside a building with appropriate setbacks, as I explained
Very interestingly, Sag Harbor's open sewage treatment plant was just in the news. Can you spend a moment on that?
Yeah. So it's pretty much like if you're looking at your garbage can and your garbage can is open, you're smelling the garbage. But if your garbage can is closed, this is one way of doing it. So there's several things. So one thing is to enclose this equipment. The other thing is to operate the plant right. So if you provide the bacteria with the air they need, if you keep your system running right, then it's going to be what they call an earthy smell. It's not offensive.
But I also point out that there is a sewage treatment plant currently in the village.
Yeah, I was gonna.
At Southampton Hospital, surrounded by many fine homes, none of whom, to my knowledge, are complaining about odors from the existing 80,000 gallon a day treatment plant at the hospital.
Correct. So this slide actually shows that. So the one on the top right, that so maybe a little bit hard to see, but that green square or green outline is the building right across from the hospital. So you see the hospital on the left, and on the right, that's the sewage treatment plant for the hospital, and it's currently running. So this is kind of one example. And something to note is that this plant has the treatment system that this plant has is called an RBC. It's an old system, so it's a rotating filter that's actually pretty open. So basically what you have is a filter that rotates, and it's rotating sewage. So but I went inside, and it's not really that bad. So, but it's closed also. So that's one. Here you could also see one in Melville. This is the Green and Half Hallows. This plant, like the outline, sorry, so kind of a little small. I was trying to get to the area that shows the residential portion of the area, and it's the same. This one, this plant actually has the same system that we're proposing, the same process, and it's BR. It's totally enclosed, and no
John, I just want to point out, because many of you have read in the Southampton Press over the last few years, and we've looked at sites, neighbors who are convinced that their property owners will collapse when a sewer treatment plant is put next to it. These are multi-million-dollar homes in Melville, all around the plant. And that's what's, I think, so important about that photo. We will never have anything happen in this village if we let all the people with all their myths tell everyone that their property values will collapse. It certainly hasn't happened on Wickapog Road, as far as I know, given where property values in Wickapog Road were 30 years ago versus today, with the plant, and it certainly hasn't happened in Melville. So just to add on, and then I'll let Adriana go on a 4-acre site, the building is somewhere around 12 to 15,000 feet. So another way of putting it is you have permanent open space of virtually all of a 4-acre site. The rest of the site is really the leaching field, which is the water, the cleaned water percolating into the ground. So, okay.
So this is going a little bit onto also the concerns about groundwater and the impact of the plant onto groundwater. So what this is describing is, as I said before, the plant is designed within the Suffolk County Health Department standards, which says less than 10 milligrams per liter in that effluent. So this comes to what Dr. Gabler was explaining about this being a component of your, let's say, your cleanliness of the water that's coming out of the plant. So if you look at comparisons, the current disposal system, so meaning the cesspool, the septic tanks, are contributing about 65 milligrams per liter. So an IA system by the health department is requested to be less than 19 milligrams per liter. And for the health department, as I said, is less than 10 milligrams per liter, and this treatment plant, the process that is being used, is sees effluent sort of around 5 milligrams per liter. We also, the other aspect that we want to point out is that water, the water that comes from the public wells is from the Magathy aquifer, which is more than 100 feet below grade. So this goes into the project estimated construction cost. This was based on the conceptual design of the plant. It was completed in 2021. However, this was updated. The values are updated to midpoint of construction about this time. So it needs a little a little bump depending on when the construction is going to start. So it goes through the different parts of the system. So it's the collection system, estimated to be 11.5 million. The pump station. So once the flow is collected from the parcels, it needs to be sent where the plant is going to go. So the sewage treatment plant, and so for a total capital cost, estimated capital cost of 35.5 million, and with an operating and maintenance cost of about 400,000 a year.
How many pumping stations would be in this system that's currently zoned?
On the conceptual design, we see only one.
Only one.
You say 100% sure that there will be no odor in the area of 100%, no doubt about it. Can you say that?
I can't say 100%. No, that's the
There is a
reality.
possibility
The reason,
of an
but the reason for the odors wouldn't be normal operation of the plant. It will be an upset, that it's very uncommon, and then they, left the doors open. There's an upset of the plant, and they're doing, let's say, work at the plant and left, doors open, but it's not something that should happen or, will happen. Like, I guess the point is the village will maintain and operate the plant in a way that's run how it's supposed to run. No odors outside the building.
I know people that live next to the hospital treatment plant, and they didn't even know it was next to them. And that's an old technology. So they had no awareness that it was contiguous to their property.
It's much smaller.
And that plant is rated for 104,000 gallons per day.
Yeah, I would point out if you want to get, I always think my voice is loud enough anyway.
You're good.
Okay, so just there are some other plants in the area. So if you go to Riverhead, that's actually a more up-to-date plant. You can walk right up to the plant. It's in an open field. There's no smell whatsoever. Absolutely none. So I mean, these plants are all over Suffolk County, and the modern plants, you just don't have smell. Now, as Adriana said, someone can leave a door open, something can happen, but on a constant basis, there's just no smell at all in these plants. Yes.
I was on the hospital board for 18 years, co-chaired the grounds and properties. The sewer plant was within our purview.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just mentioned. In my knowledge, nobody ever made a complaint in 18 years about that plant being there. Most people don't even know it's there. I would say that anytime you wanted to go around that plant, walk around it, you'll never see. I've never smelled anything from that plant. And
that's an old plant. It's an old and not as.
So it's built in the 1970s and it had an upgrade in the 90s, but not.
Right.
And I'm familiar with the Riverhead plant.
Right.
Again, you're right. No odor.
Absolutely.
The non-issue.
So this is calculating the estimated debt service for the construction of the plant, and this is based on, what is expected for the financing of whatever is left after funding. So if there's zero funding, those are the numbers. If the villages obtains at least 25% of the subsidy through funds, or if it is 50%. So right now, there's a lot of things in place to obtain different funds from different sources. One of them is the CPF, which is currently what Dr. Gabriel was mentioning, currently an ask of 10 million. There's also one from the state and for water quality improvement. And the village is in what they call their multi-year list, which means they put them in place and gives them a scoring criteria. So depending on the scoring criteria, the plan gets funded, and depending on what's to distribute. So if this year there's a lot more to give around, then they'll go to to most of the plans they have, or most of the projects they have to provide funds.
Can you just go back to that? On that last one is the typical annual impact, property values. So basically, are we saying that the cost of this is going to be spread throughout all of the village taxpayers or just the business district?
Yeah, let me maybe talk about that. And I want to give credit to Ed Moneypenny and Rob Brady and the committee who have been working on this. So the concept is that the village as a whole is funding the capital work to build the plant. And as Adriana said, the average, if you look across the county, is about 50% of the cost gets covered in public grants. The current town supervisor is somewhat of a hero in her village because she ended up getting 100% of the cost covered by outside money, but we're not assuming that. So that's the 50% column. So that cost is borne by the entire village. We, thanks to many in this room, many of you who have worked at it over the years, have an excellent credit rating in this village, so we can finance at a very low cost. And then the annual operating cost gets covered by the people who are served. So the 250 parcels within the service district pay for the annual operating. And so when you see the cost at the end, I think it's $500 and something for a house that's about a $5 million value a year. That's to cover the bond issue. So it's not a large cost, but we want to be totally transparent. There is some cost to it. So what we're doing in effect is what the work Chris is doing and the village has been doing is to treat the nitrogen when it gets to the lake. This is to make sure the nitrogen never gets there. And that long term is really the answer here. You can't you're trying to deal with a problem that will continue to happen. We want to solve it for once and for all. And we understand it's going to take a long time, but that's what it does. But that's how the course should have been done, is really looking at people in the business district are paying for the cost of operating on an annual basis.
I was very curious about that because that's, I think, a fair way of doing it. Years ago, when they built the parking lots in the back, the business community absorbed a huge percentage of that. But that was a little different situation than this because I feel that the sewage system benefits the entire community.
Right. But the businesses will benefit, or the owners really of those of those properties, because it's going to, as you know, it's going to diversify the uses. So you'll be able to put a restaurant in a building that currently doesn't have a restaurant. You'll be able to put apartments on the second floor. You'll be able to do all of the things that are not now possible because the Department of Health, as you know well from your years on the board, will not allow any more wet uses to be established in the village. So.
And just one further point, because I can't control myself.
I'm sorry.
We've taken some surveys of local businesses and what they're paying now to have their septics cleaned. This is going to be cheaper. We're going to be helping them that way, especially the restaurants down here.
I think there's also concern, though, that now if you have sewer, that you could overdevelop the business district. So if you could talk to what's being done at the village level to make sure that even though we have a sewer, we're not going to have 5-story buildings running down Main Street.
Yeah. Do you want to go maybe to the next slide? Let's keep going. Yeah, Nancy's correct. So just as a timeline, and this really started, I want to give a shout out to Mark Epley, who started this in 2007, when it first became evident that there were issues in the lake, one of the first things that the mayor at the time said and the trustees was, let's study what's happening, but we really need to get the zoning under control, because if we ever do have a sewer, we don't want unbridled development in the village. So starting in 2007, and I think then in 2009, we adopted the Village Center master plan and did a zoning that really downzoned in effect the village business to guide that. And then further, much further on in 2020, 2021, and getting to, I think, last year, the village looked again at its overall master plan, and that created further controls for the village business district. So there's limits now to what you can build. The numbers that Adriana quoted, the 150,000 current usage, which is really in part based on the Suffolk County Water Authority. The 195 eventual use is looking at every parcel and how much could be developed under the new zoning. So that's the eventual build out 30, 40 years from now, your kids or whatever may see. I doubt any of us in this room are going to see.
I read that it's also to benefit affordable housing.
Correct. You can't build actually any housing.
Be paying for the use.
Yes. Anyone in the district will pay for the use.
Yeah, and Paul also can point out. Yeah, also to go with Paul and Roy's comment, that's why you have zoning. It shouldn't impede, sort of say, modernization. Zoning should go hand in hand. You shouldn't let the possibilities of a better system just say it's going to run rampant, because that's why you have zoning laws. And that can include height limitation, use, character, everything the village has in place. So
Parking is a big, significant part of that, too.
what's that? Yeah.
I said parking is a significant
Parking as
part
well,
of that,
yeah.
because most of the buildings in the downtown business district don't have their own parking. They're relying on public parking. So there's those restrictions that are in place that are going to limit what you can do with your building.
Yeah, definitely, plus use, plus height, plus character, all those things have to play into it.
I just wanted to add that when we did that village business master plan, it was very involved. I mean, people don't understand how involved it was. There were measurements of vestibules, of shops on Main Street and down Job's Lane. There were heights. It was discussed like a 3-story building on Main Street. You could only have the possibility of that at a certain distance to mimic what we have on Main Street and Job's Lane. I mean, the biggest concern was Nugent Street for development and Windmill Lane. So it was put into place that nothing could take place there unless it was exactly the way we have it on Main Street. So there really are limitations as to how that development can go forward. And that was done because we knew sewage treatment was coming, and we did not want to give the green light to all of these people coming in and developing and putting up high buildings. We were concerned about that.
Can I ask maybe either our engineering expert or Dr. Goldberg? I know the clear and present danger is the harmful algae blooms caused by nitrogen, and that's a big impact from the sewer. Can you talk about some of the other things that a sewer plant does in terms of either forever chemicals, prescription drug loads, the other benefits that come along besides just reduction of nitrogen?
The plant has limitations not only on nitrogen, it has limitations on total dissolved solids, so you're not overloading with sediments. It has restrictions on biological oxygen demand, which is like the organic portion of the effluent. There has been new standards for things like forever chemicals that may come as part of the health department standards for the plant as well. That could be looked at when the design starts.
In theory, though, having a plant allows future modification or modules to be put in as new filtration technologies are created.
Correct, and the plant itself, the standards call for an 100% expansion. So when the site is looked at, the process building has the ability to grow to accommodate double the flow that it is designed for.
Could you explain in more detail why an IA system would not be feasible as an alternative to a centralized system?
So when you look at the IA systems, you need to find an area for it. So if you have, let's say, the downtown area, which is what's going to be covered by these, by the sewer system, you will be looking at, let's say, the parking lot. So you will be taking away a portion of that to make sure that your system has access. At a minimum, you will have to be limited access for that. In addition, you'll be saying that your effluent quality is not as strict. The standards are not as strict for a treatment that for an IA system than they are for a treatment plant. So there is the again, you're still left with solids to be dealt with. This still needs like monitoring. So if a parcel owner it's not as responsible, I would say. It might, let's say the system has a blower. Blower broke, but the system's still there. So I know this has been implemented and it's a great idea for areas that are outside of densely populated areas. But it's still a lot to do for it. Like, I know they're talking about how they want to monitor this. Like the Suffolk County is even thinking about it because they're saying, okay, we are giving grants for the installation for these IAs, but how are we monitoring? So right now, like the health department actually visits the treatment plants. And they have to keep monitoring, records of what the quality of the effluent, and they look at maintenance issues. If they have a maintenance issue, they will report it. Let's say your treatment needs one process unit, a specific tank, but you have two, and so the health department goes there and says you have to have your two tanks in condition to operate, because the reason there's a second tank is because you need a standby. You need something that the first tank didn't work, then you could send flow there, and in the meantime, you repair the other. So I think the biggest issue is the implementation, so areas. The second issue is like, how are we really monitoring that this effect is really as we need, and that the technology is not as stringent. Dr. Gabler was talking about adding, an extra step to these IA systems, which is great because it reduces the nitrogen more. But then again, it's a little bit more into that, and I'm not saying it's not a good idea. I'm just saying that in the case of the downtown area, it's not the not the optimal idea.
Adrian, how many, just for perspective, if you did the IA system, how many parcels, when you look at the number of parcels that are directly served by the central system versus an IA, what are you putting in? 70, 80 of these individual systems that you have to A, install, and then B, monitor, and C, the effluent is not at the same standards. Would that be an accurate statement?
Well, yes, and it's a lot to deal with at the same time, because think about all the parcels contributing to a tank, call it whatever system it is. So you will need to make sure that all the businesses within one system, if you manage to combine their flow, that their flow, coming from the building or for wherever it is, could reach that place by gravity. Because then if not, then you will need another pump to wherever you put in that small system. So it creates a concern. So it will be a system that, let's say 5-6 businesses will be sharing. So who is responsible? Is the village responsible for each of those systems? Or are the owners going to create an association to monitor that system? What happens if there is a backup because somebody, if it's a restaurant, their grease trap is not working and grease is dumping it to this IA system. So there's a lot of things that you will have to have all these little like mini communities to get together to decide where, how, and who. So
If you do a sewer district with IAs, would you still have the Suffolk County monitoring the same way we monitor a centralized system?
they're not even monitoring their own, the IA systems they're installing on,
I mean,
elsewhere.
within a business district, you could not implement a similar system where they would monitor the same way you put the central system or not working.
Well, yes, like I said, they're looking into implementing like even automatic sampling. So putting sampling systems within the units. But this will require, I would doubt the county will take something like that. It will have to be onto the villages.
Who is the mic?
And a simple question. What kind of timeline should we be looking at before the plant becomes operational?
Well, so we didn't do this slides, but this is talking about the process. So the site needs to be selected because we could design the collection system. We can't design the conveyance system until we know where we send in the flow to. So that's one of the biggest issues. And then as far as timeline, about 12 months for design. There needs to be a complete topographical survey of the area. There needs to be geotechnical investigations to see the soils, develop the plans and specification. There's a funding process, and then 2 to 2.5 years for the construction of the collection system and the plant.
Yeah.
This is not easy, I know. Tell us about the site selection. How's
Sure.
that going? That's the white elephant in the room.
Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about that. So, as I think many of you in the room may know, we found a site that I say this, such with such is life, but we actually found the ideal site a few years ago, which was Bowers Lane, which was a isolated triangle of land, which had no houses around it, fit the site very well. One of the reasons we spent time this morning going through sort of the issues around the plant is the issues that came up in that were that people's property values were going to be destroyed, that it would smell, and then more than anything, that their groundwater would be impacted by the plant. So that site did not go forward. It got caught in, as you may know, town politics at the time. So we've really, after that, been looking for sites that have as little impact as possible. As you know, I mean, it's been public information. We looked at the site that National Grid is about to vacate on David White's Lane. We've looked at some other sites around the village. A number of the sites, a lot of people have asked, for example, about Aldridge Lane and other obvious sites that are open. Putting aside issues of setback, the other issue that we have in the village is the Suffolk County Water Authority will not allow any sites that are in their watershed. So if you look at where the water tanks for the Suffolk County Water Authority or the thing that says Southampton on it, you can have a site that's within that shed. So that also limits it. So we do have a few sites we're looking at pretty seriously. Most of them around the border of the village. One a little further from the village. And so we're trying to bring those to a close. Yes.
Bear with me because I'm not an engineer nor a doctor, but there is a question in an area that I think we haven't covered yet that I think is important to cover.
Okay.
Odor aside, location aside, etc. As I started to do some research to try to educate myself on this, I came across a series of studies. I'm about to quote from the Journal of Environmental and Public Health.
Okay.
And it would frame I have a series of questions, none of which I'll ask today except this one. It goes as follows. Air is a transport environment, and microorganisms such as emitted bacterial contamination can be transported over considerable distances as a consequence of wind after being introduced during the process of aeration. Atmospheric emissions may be hazardous to human health because bioaerosols aerosols may contain different types of microorganisms, such as viruses, pathogenic bacteria, fungi, capable of causing skin, digestive system, respiratory, and nervous system diseases. So I think if not today, we ought to get some really clear answers to the community on how those kinds of risks will be controlled. Everybody's focused on odor, which I would agree is important, but there are these other factors as well.
Yeah, so I think you were here at the beginning.
I was.
Yeah, so that's actually Dr. Gobler mentioned that when he was talking about the fear of some of the things that are happening in the lake, and that is very much what that article is quoting. That's one of the reasons to do a plan, because you're taking all of those and putting them within a closed building and a process. That's why you're doing a plant in pond.
Just to be careful.
Yeah.
So the question really has to do, and the research had to do, with the exchange of air within that enclosed plant. You have to aerate the material, right? You alluded to that a number of times. That air is going to come out at some point. It's going to get aerosolized. Different people have mentioned that risk in non-descript ways. But nonetheless, to me, that's what I see as the major risk for us as a community. And forget about 1 to 2 miles. Research indicates you kind of don't want to be within 1 to 2 miles of one of these plants. I acknowledge we've already got one in the village, which I wonder whether or not that's posing risk to us as we speak.
Does my source give examples of pathogens that have created outbreaks or disease?
It does.
I've never heard of this.
Separately, I can, if there's a way to get back to the village or whatever, I can provide some of the studies I came across.
Yeah. So the plant, the process that are going to occur at the plant are enclosed in a building, and the building is kept with the ventilation negative, so that it doesn't escape from the building. And there is a carbon filter that will provide filtration for the flow.
Yeah,
but
see you say just before that though that the county and the implication was lots of others don't even do sampling.
Sampling of
the air and the air quality and so forth.
For an IA.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't talk
That's
about
for the
that.
IA. Chris, do you want to?
I think the onus would be upon you to share your sources.
Sure.
Sewage treatment plants exist all over the planet. It's the way that humans deal with human waste. I've never heard of what you're describing. I've combed the literature. I'm always looking for environmental health threats, and I can't imagine, and right now, what you're referring to. So I think.
Chris, if you don't mind, I can find you. I'll just forward directly.
Sure,
if you don't
that
mind.
would be great.
Citations
Yep.
that I use.
Okay. Perfect. Yes.
Give it to Walter.
Thank you all very much. I know the answer is money, 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 but you all are doing such a fantastic job with this whole concept, with this whole plan, with this whole proposal. Why don't we try to make it a little bit bigger and have phase 2 and phase 3 at the same time, especially taking the Village Latch and Whitefields and the Catholic Church and St. John's and the Hampton Road condominiums? Because I don't know that you're going to have this momentum the next time around when you all are retired, etc. But I don't know. I just wish that we could try to do more right now, because you all are really doing such a tremendous job.
I think, if I could take this, I think once the collection system and the treatment plant itself is in place, like I said, growing the treatment plant, it's not a difficult thing. In fact, the site is selected with that in mind. So creating a secondary, let's say, collection system for an area that wants to be added to that plant, it will be a matter of creating the collection system. Maybe will require another pump station, maybe not, depending on where it is located in relation to the pump station that is being planned, and send the flow to the same plant. So I understand your fear of that not, I guess, happening after, but I think if you let one thing go at a time, maybe it's easier to fund, maybe it's easier to put in place. So.
Thank you. And this the follow-up to the question is, could we try to get funding at the same time to put the electric lines, cable lines, etc., underground at the exact same time where this is?
That is something. I mean, I think. Sorry, let me take that for a second. So that is an issue that has come up. So just to say something that I think we haven't mentioned. So the one thing that is fortunate, because often when you're doing a sewer system like this, it causes a lot of disruption in the village. We are, as someone mentioned before, we are in a very fortunate circumstance that we have central parking lots in back of virtually all of the businesses in the district. So the lines will actually go through those parking lots, so you don't have to shut down Main Street or Jobs Lane while this is being built. And some of you who know what happened in West Hampton, they literally had to shut the streets down for 6 months. Not going to happen here. So we have been looking at what it would mean, and that's certainly come up in our committee meetings, what it would mean to try to remove some of the power lines at the same time. It's very complicated. It's very expensive. It's probably something that should be happening all over Long Island, given our weather and risk of hurricanes and other things. But that has been something we've been looking at. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you all very much for giving us this idea.
Again, if you want the PowerPoint presentation, please put your name on the list, and we appreciate that. Thank you.